of BWARP in 2022. We covered a variety of topics in our BWARP series. And for those of you who are just joining us, I am Reverend Gerald, CEO of Parkside Economic Development Corporation. And we bring you this presentation in partnership with the Los Angeles Urban League. Tonight's topic may be the most important of every topic we've had so far, because without maintaining a healthy mind, body, and soul, no amount of money or resources can be fully enjoyed. Tonight, we discuss a healthy approach to wealth building. Because of medical advancements, our mortality rates are decreasing, but African Americans are still more likely to die at an early age from all diseases. Serious mental illness rose among all ages of Black Americans between 2008 and 2018. African Americans hold a belief that stigma, psychological openness, and help seeking is something that we resist. And that's what causes the psychological problems to persist in our community. Tonight, we share a healthy approach to wealth building, featuring Regina Edmond Md and psychologist Dr. Lauren Hill. I know you're going to have a lot of questions for them at the end of their presentations, so just put them in the chat, and our producer, Jacinda Mode, will make sure that your questions get answered during the Q&A session. Our first presenter is Regina L Edmond Md, an exemplary obstetrician and gynecologist in our community. Dr. Edmond received her Bachelor of Science degree in biology from Spelman College, and then attended Michigan State University College of Human Medicine to obtain her medical degree. She is currently on staff at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center and maintains a private practice in West Hollywood that she's had for over 10 years. Dr. Edmond incorporates nutritional, emotional, and social factors as a part of our holistic approach to individualized care for her patients. Dr. Edmonds, welcome to BWARP. We're looking forward to your presentation.
Happy to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. Do I proceed?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so here we are. Good evening, everyone. I am an obstetrician gynecologist in the community, which means I predominantly take care of women. My interactions with males is often in relationship to the husbands coming in support of their wives or boyfriends in support of their girlfriends. And so as I go through my talk today, I want you to know that the topic that I'll be discussing can be generalized to both genders. We're going to not just talk about physical health, but also emotional and psychological health, as Reverend Gerald mentioned. And so let's, all right, so we are here. Oh, got it. Okay, so in general, we are a complete package, right? And in order to complete that package, we must focus on our health in terms of physical, as is illustrated in yellow here. But then there are other components. There's a meditative component. Do we take time during the day to pause and reflect? And then there's a nutritional. What are we putting in our bodies to maintain its wellness and vitality? Then there's a movement aspect to it. So we can be putting in the right foods, but if we're not moving our bodies, there'll be a deficit there. There'll be stiffness. There'll be muscle weakness. And then in terms of relaxation, there must be that work-life balance, which now that many people are working from home, needs to become a higher priority, such that you take that break away from the computer. Since home and work are in the same location, I hear from my patients that they don't take that break. There's no bio break, as one of my colleagues stated so proficiently. All right, moving on. So in terms of our roles, again, this is gender-based, but it can be generalized for all people, because we have so many roles in our lives. And in some of our cases, we are mothers, we're sisters, where wives, daughters, friends, partners, granddaughters, workers, caregivers, and grandmothers. But in order to balance all of our roles, excuse me, I'm going to take a sip of water here. In order to balance all of the demands that are on us, it's important to prioritize our passion and our peace in order to get to that prosperity that we all seek to have. And that definitely comes from balancing. So I will kind of break down each one of those 5 pieces of the pie that I illustrated in the initial slide, starting with nutrition. What are we putting in? What do we choose? And so in terms of choices, there are so many in terms of, there's the trendy things, paleo or keto, that many may be hearing about in the media, where you avoid carbs and focus on proteins, which can be valuable, but recommended on a short term, not as a long-term option for health maintenance. Then there's a vegetarian or vegan option, where you avoid meat products or meat byproducts, which can provide health, but you must certainly be cautious and careful to replace certain nutrients to make sure you don't become deficient. Just being vegan or vegetarian, people associate with being healthier, but it is not always the case if not done in a balanced fashion. And then there's a regular diet where you eat whatever you want with monitoring your portions and regulate the timing of your meals. So in terms of some principles for healthy eating, organic is preferred in some cases because it minimizes the exposure to pesticides. Farm to table, which also minimizes the processing in between, right? You get it from the farm, get it to your table without it going through so many different steps. Using fresh ingredients, responsibly sourced foods. We're so fortunate, for those of us who are listening from California, where we have access to the farms that actually grow the food. And if you have access to a farmer's market, I highly recommend that, because you get a chance to participate in supporting growers in our community. And as well as having your own garden, an urban garden, which is also relatively simple to do as well. And then make your own meals. Oh, no, it says make your meals mirror your activity. So if you're going to be very busy, eat more. In some cases, many people who are busy, and I talk to them, I'm like, have you eaten? What are you eating? They say, no, because I'm so busy, I can't eat. But the best way to maintain your health, which then becomes your wealth, is to eat in mirror fashion to the amount of energy you are planning to expend. And then in terms of caffeine and alcohol, I put minimize that, because in many cases, caffeine not only can be a stimulant, if taken in too high a dose, can interrupt your sleep. Also, caffeine is a dehydrator to the body, so it releases more water, and then it can cause you to have sometimes aches and pains. If your body's dehydrated, you can get headaches, you can have all other type of dysfunctions in the body. So just a brief word on intermittent fasting, as that is also a trend in the media, where focusing on certain hours of the day to eat, and then not eating food, or just maintaining water and fruit in those quote fasting hours will help to optimize your your metabolism, so that you can help to maintain your weight in an easier fashion. And you'll see that there are several ways that it's done, either at a 16-hour fast with eating 8 hours in the day, or having a regular diet for 5 days out of the week, and then doing a fast for 2, where you do an extremely limited calorie intake. Or then there's a warrior diet, where you eat a huge meal at night and go through the day with small amounts of food. These, and as I mentioned these, if you have any health conditions, any type of medication that you're taking that requires you to take it with food, these diets may not be recommended for you. So certainly before you do anything like this, check with your healthcare provider for guidance. And then there's an alternate day fast, eat then fast. then eat again. And then some meal skipping where you just skip certain meals and then eat one meal a day. And then the focus on water. So if we understand the function of water, the purpose of water, it helps. Our whole body is 70% water, and it can help to relieve underlying health conditions, right? However, in terms of that recommended 8 glasses per day may not be applicable for all scenarios. So if you do have underlying health conditions, you may need to drink less. If you're, for example, for kidney disease, if your level of activity is higher and you're losing more water, you might need more water. Depending on the season, if it's very humid and you're perspiring, more water may be required, or based on your current health status. So again, consult a physician if you're at all having concerns about how much water to take. Water consumption guide. So the average is 6 to 8 glasses per day. And then 10 glasses a day is a goal for those with no health conditions, no reasons to restrict water. 12 glasses a day for weight loss and cleansing. So if you're really wanting to reduce your calorie intake, you can replace that with water. This is intended to be done for a short time, not to be done over long periods of time if you're cleansing or fasting. Okay, and then let's get physical to the activity component of our health. And so you see that there's so many ways to approach exercise. And my recommendation to patients is do the kind of exercise that you'll stick with. There's so many options, so many ways to health, but the one that'll keep you healthy is the one that you'll do when you don't feel like doing it. And so in general, 30 minutes a day, 5 to 6 days a week, and of moderate intensity, right? So when it comes to the intensity, keeping it moderate will minimize injury. And then I didn't add here, but stretching. Next slide, it's right there. Don't forget to stretch. So as we mature, our ligaments need some reminder or preparation for exercise and preparation for recovery. So stretching before and after allows us to minimize that injury, pulled muscles, pulled ligaments, which can take us away from our exercise routine. Okay, health maintenance. So in this next section, I am going to focus a little bit on health maintenance for women, but then there will also be some components that's generalizable for men and women. What tests are needed and when? So we have Pap Smear that starts at the age of 21 and goes up until the age of 65. Then the recommendation for STD screening, which stands for sexually transmitted diseases, where we check for chlamydia, gonorrhea, HIV, hepatitis B, hepatitis C, and syphilis. We do that yearly until the age of 25. And then I also recommend that if you change sexual partners to do it at that time as well, to maintain. Then mammograms are done yearly starting at 40. If you have a family history of breast cancer, it is recommended to do that earlier. Bone density testing started at the age of 65, done every other year. But then in some communities of Asian descent or Caucasian, we can do that. We can start that a little bit earlier. Colonoscopy done every 5 to 10 years, starting at 50. That needs to be changed to 45 for African Americans every 5 to 10 years. Diabetes screening, cholesterol screening, and thyroid screening. In my practice, I do these once a year, but in an internal medicine office, they will set the schedule. Why do I need a Pap smear? It's a simple test. It's a quick test, and it's very effective. We're able to tell you if your cervix is healthy. We screen for cervical cancer. And if you're over the age of 30, we check for HPV, which stands for human papillomavirus, which is the culprit in up to 70% of cervical cancers. Go get tested, because ultimately what's love got to do with it when it comes to our health? And in terms of infections that affect women, it becomes very symptomatic. It can require, if it goes untreated, you'd have to go to the hospital and need antibiotics, and it can become a very serious thing, and in rare occasions require surgery. So it's very easy to get tested. A quick urine test, a quick blood test will give all the information you need. Mammogram. Okay, so starting at 40, and I know some women avoid this because of the pain or discomfort associated with it, but it's a 5-minute test, ladies? Isn't that about right? You go there, it's not pleasant. We don't do it because it's pleasant. We do it because we want to make sure that we're healthy. So best time for those who are still having periods, the recommendation is to do it right after the period is finished. That way the breasts are less sensitive. You can get the information and make sure you're okay. So you start at 40. We do it earlier if you have a lump or if your family history dictates. And then the doctor should do a self-breast exam. Well, clinical breast exam is what the doctor does. Self-breast exam is what you do in the shower once a month. It's the gold standard. You may hear about thermography, ultrasound, MRI, all of those things can have use, but the gold standard is to do the mammogram. Low radiation, and again, you may need an ultrasound if the radiologist suggests. And we can do some genetic testing to help with your risk status and the frequency of your mammograms based on your family history. Osteoporosis screening. Am I at risk for a fracture? So as we get older, our bones weaken. We need to get that done every other year. Asian and Caucasian women are screened earlier because they are at a higher risk. Hey, colonoscopy. Now, this is the one test that I think of all the screenings that patients tend to avoid because of the old theory regarding the horrible preparation, where they're stuck at home, stuck on the toilet in preparation for the colonoscopy. They've changed that since the old days, and it's something that can be done easily. You drink some Gatorade, you put the little medicine inside to help you go to the bathroom. It's less disruptive than it has ever been. So there's no excuse, no reason why you can't go in and get this test done. It's the gold standard. They look inside, look all the way around in your colon, look for polyps, which is how cancer starts. It starts as a little tiny growth the size of a pea. They can biopsy it and often take it away and prevent you from having to have much more invasive procedures later on. Why am I gaining weight, doc? So that's a common question that I get in my office. And I think, in our world, we want to keep our bodies in shape, and we use weight as that indicator. So we talk about some of the things that impact our weight. High cholesterol, we want to make sure it's below 200. Diabetes, make sure your blood sugar is less than 120, and that the hemoglobin A1C. So what is that? That's a marker for the amount of sugar in your blood. Needs to stay below 5.4%. Then we look at the thyroid. Sometimes if our thyroid is sluggish, we're not able to lose weight, our metabolism is lower, so your doctor should check on that as well. Okay, so then we move on. Some time for R&R. How many of us on this call take some time every day for ourselves? Sometimes it's easier if we're not working, but it's really important regardless to take that time. And it doesn't have to be long, but it does have to be deliberate in some cases for those who are busy, myself included. A spa day, if you have a whole day to take time for yourself. Staycation, this was during COVID where staycation was the only option. Vacation, now that things are opening up, you can take that time to sleep in, you can read. But my recommendation is to avoid technology, because we spend so much time on technology, and we have to get back to basics in order to get back to ourselves and get grounded. The radiation coming from the screens all day can't be good for our health. But going outside and playing, remember how when we were children, we go outside and play, we restored ourselves. We always were happy when we came in from playing. So getting back to that will help to restore us. Okay, so we covered a lot of ground. And one of the key things before we go into the meditative piece is, wealth and cost of things, right? So we mentioned a lot of health maintenance. And in many cases, health maintenance is covered by insurance, regardless of what kind of insurance you have, it's usually covered. And then if we talk about, even if we don't have insurance, those costs of the health maintenance is far, far less than if we had to go and have a surgery, for example, or had to do something to rescue our health. So keep that in mind. Be grateful for the health that we have and know that it's easy to maintain, but very expensive and very difficult to fight back when health is evading us to get us back in balance. So do our best to stay in balance. And so as I begin to close, we're going to take a moment and settle ourselves in our chair and remember that we have the key to balancing ourselves at every moment. To take that breath, just take a deep breath in together here and let it out. And what you've done in that moment is you've taken time to acknowledge the connection between the invisible and you. And you've taken another moment to release anything that's other than the divine, right? Because we must stay connected. We are inextricably connected already, but if we consciously take a moment to connect to that, it will help us stay in balance. It's all about balance. And so I want to thank you all for your time and attention. And I'd love to answer questions later, but I'll turn the floor back over.
Thank you, Dr. Edmond,
Welcome.
for that great presentation. And I especially like the part about the relaxation and taking a breath. It is very important that we let go of all that tension and release every single day and take some time, quiet time, every time we get a chance throughout the day. So our next presenter is Dr. Lauren M. Hill. I should say Dr. Lauren M. Hill. She's a licensed clinical psychologist in private practice. She's held several positions in academia, most recently the director of the forensic psychology at Fielding Graduate University. Prior to that appointment, Dr. Hill was department chair and director of the Forensic Training Institute at the Chicago School of Professional Psychology, Los Angeles campus. Dr. Hill's passion is to identify and build relationships to provide the underserved and under-resourced community members with information about the importance of mental health and mental wellness. Dr. Hill, thank you for being with us today. It's time for you now to let us know how we can keep our minds focused in the right direction and overcome all of the stress and strain that this life puts upon us.
Thank you so much, Reverend Gerald, and thank you to my colleague, Dr. Edmonds, for that wonderful presentation on physical health. I would like to follow up with what my colleague began presenting on with the physical aspect, and I'm going to be talking about mental health. So what is mental health? Let's just define it so that we are using the same words, operating from the same space. So our mental health includes our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. It affects how we think, feel, and act. It also determines how we handle stress, relate to others, and make healthy choices. Mental health is important at every stage of our life, including childhood and adolescence through adulthood. So is mental health really that important? Well, as a behavioral health specialist, of course, I would say it's always important, but oftentimes we neglect our mental health. So I want to take a little bit of time to touch upon a few of the statistics around mental health and continue to define it. So mental health is a state of well-being in which the individual realizes their own abilities, can cope with normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. Now, with that definition in mind, the CDC says that it is estimated that only about 17% of US adults are considered to be in a state of optimal mental health. And there's emerging evidence that positive mental health is associated with improved outcomes. Now, this statistic was prior to the pandemic. So keeping in mind that there was a lot of anxiety and stress around the last 2 years, this number may actually be lower. So I want us to be thinking always about physical health and mental health, that we can't separate them, right? So a lot of my practice and my talks are helping people to understand that your mental health and your physical health go hand in hand. So this little graphic here shows that, I am here, which means I'm right in the middle of both of these things. So why is mental health important for overall health? Well, mental and physical health are equally important components of overall health. For example, depression increase the risk of many types of physical health problems, particularly long-lasting conditions like diabetes, heart disease, and stroke. Similarly, the presence of chronic conditions can increase the risk for mental illness. So as my colleague, Dr. Edmonds, pointed out in her presentation, there's diabetes, there's heart disease, there's other types of disorders. And we're finding more and more that stress is one of the contributors to these things, in addition to some of the physical predispositions you may have. So you want to really be mindful of your stress and your anxiety levels. Can your mental health change over time? Absolutely. It's important to remember that a person's mental health can change over time depending on many factors. When the demands placed on a person exceed their resources and coping abilities, their mental health could be impacted. For example, if someone's working long hours, caring for a relative, or experiencing economic hardships, they may experience poor mental health. Now, when we think about economic hardships and racial and ethnic communities, we need to really be mindful about the pressures that we have. Do we have enough? Will we have enough? Wealth attainment, will it last? Will it sort of turn into mist in front of us? All of these things can be stressful. So even if you're relatively stable, there could be some anxiety around losing resources. So we want to be mindful of that as well. Now, the World Health Organization says that mental health is more than the absence of mental disorder. Mental health is an integral part of health. Indeed, there's no health without mental health. Mental health is determined by socioeconomic and biological and environmental factors. So again, we've got that socioeconomic component that we want to be mindful of. So here's just a little graphic about the cycles of money and mental health problems. And if you're experiencing some financial difficulty, then that causes stresses, anxiety. It can be worsened by collections activities or going on without stress, without essentials. So these are very stressful times, and we want to be thinking about how we can address those. And then the other part of it, mental health problems make it harder to earn, manage, and keep spending, and how to ask for help. So if we are stressed out, then how are we going to manage our money? If we don't have any money, how are we going to manage our finances? So it can be a kind of a vicious cycle. Now we want to think about our quality of life, right? So quality of life is impacted by all of these factors: physical health, mental health, social health, environmental health, occupational health, and financial health. So the more we can check off these boxes as being okay or addressed, then our quality of life will be impacted and better. So what can we do now? Well, we just had a great breathing exercise. We have to always remember that breathing can solve a lot of issues, especially if you're stressed or you're feeling anxious. If you just get in tune to your body and breathe, I usually say take 5 deep breaths. As Dr. Edmonds took us through a breathing exercise where we did 1 breath, we might have found that that was calming. So imagine if you take 5 breaths. There's some other things that I've put here that really don't have anything to do with money, right? So oftentimes we're so tied to how much money we have or how much we don't have. And some of these things that we are looking here on this list and the list that follow have nothing to do with money. So value yourself. Know that you are valuable. Give of yourself. You can volunteer. You can think of ways in which you can give to others. Set realistic goals at anything that you're doing, whether it's a financial goal or whether it's a personal goal, like going back to school or taking some courses. Take care of your body. Like Dr. Edmonds said, a spa day or at least a respite, right, throughout the day. Learn how to deal with your stress. Break up the monotony. So step away from the computer, step away from the, from your phone, all kind of technology, just tune out for a little while. And even if you're just have a regular schedule that you keep to, and that's fine, sometimes just break it up. Like how you drive to work, if you're going back to the office, can you take a scenic route and just look at what's going on outside the window? Remember to get help when you need it. Surround yourself with good people. I always say that, probably one of the worst things that we do to ourselves is we surround ourselves with naysayers or negative people. That is such a drain, and it really doesn't help you. Now there's value and benefit to having people around you who will give you feedback. But if they're just negative and naysayers, then you need to think about some ways to limit your time that you spend with them. Quiet your mind. You can do this by meditating. Some people tell me, Dr. Hill, I can't meditate. I've never been able to do it. So I understand that, but there's ways in which you can quiet your mind by simply taking a walk or going outside and just looking up at the sky. And remember, as Dr. Edmonds said, there were times when we can think about how we were children and how we used to play or how we can be childlike. And so just unplugging from some of the stressors and quieting your mind for a little while. And one of the things that I say to some of my clients is keep a gratitude journal. So every night before you go to bed, write 5 things in your journal that you're grateful for. It could be a little difficult in the beginning if you're having a challenging time, but there are some things you can all be grateful for. So think about that. Limit drugs and avoid drugs and limit alcohol, I should say. So, you want to be in your right mind when you're making financial decisions, and you also just want to be cognizant of what's going on. So here's some other things that you can do now. Take time out for yourself, connect with others, participate and share interests. So during the pandemic, I think one of the positive unintended consequences was that people were coming up with all sorts of things to do at home that they had never thought about. Adult coloring books, baking, cooking, gardening. So I would recommend that you try to find something that is fun and interesting and can just give you a break, right? Contribute to your community, take time out to enjoy, challenge yourself, be mindful of what you eat, rest and refresh, notice the here and now, meaning being mindful, and recognize your resilience. I think a lot of times we beat ourselves up and we don't think about, wow, I'm doing okay and I'm still here. And as long as you're still here and you're doing okay, there's always a chance to make things better. So here are just 7 quick steps to stop worrying about money. So give yourself a break, right? If you can stop judging yourself, you'll have an easier time making the decisions that are right for you and your family. Make a budget you can actually follow. Check your credit cards closely. Talk to a mental health professional. So I want to live there for a second. So you may say, Dr. Hill, why is talking to a mental health professional going to help me with my money management? Well, if you want to get a handle on your financial situations, it's critical to manage your mental health appropriately. So remember, we talked about mental health in the beginning and we defined it, and mental health really has to do with your mindset. So I see people who are anxious, stressed, worrying. And so talking to a professional can help you sort of get a handle on that. So then you want to set financial goals for yourself, focus your attention on what you know and can control, and then start saving for your retirement. So who should I contact if I need help? Right. So I just wanted to quickly go over these types of titles because sometimes there's some confusion about who does what. So a psychiatrist is an MD and they prescribe medication if you were to need some psychiatric medication. And sometimes it's just a mood stabilizer, and your general practitioner might be able to do that as well. But I usually suggest seeing a psychiatrist. You can see a psychologist. A psychologist is someone like myself who specializes in different areas or is a general clinician. You usually go in, talk to them, put together a treatment plan. They may work in tandem with a psychiatrist. They may refer you. A therapist will also be someone who you can come in and talk to. During the pandemic, one of the upsides was that we were able to get behavioral health parity with the medical profession in that we were able to do telehealth. So you may now be able to see someone through your insurance through telehealth. And then we have counselors, and those are usually master level individuals like the therapist. There's peer support. A peer support is someone who is, not a credentialed or licensed person, but they may have gone through something you've gone through, and then you can talk to them about the different aspects. There's various self-help groups, and then there's the National Institute on Mental Health, American Psychological Association. If you want to find a therapist, you can look into Psychology Today. And then if you have a loved one that has some mental health issues, or if you just want to find out more about mental health, you can look at the National Alliance on Mental Illness. And so that brings me to the end of our presentation. And this is just a little bit about myself. And Reverend Gerald introduced me earlier, but if you want to find out more, you can look me up online or you can go to theacclivity.com.
Righty. Thank you, Dr. Hill, and thank you, Dr. Edmond, for your presentations. We will now begin the Q&A portion of the program. For those that have questions, please post your questions in the chat and I will read them out one by one or in the Q&A prompt. Any questions, anyone? Oh, Dr. Edmond? Okay. Unmute yourself.
I actually have a question for Dr. Lauren.
Okay.
And thank you again. It was an excellent presentation. What about those who you mentioned sort of the talking to a health professional and sort of normalizing that, which I appreciate. But how would someone obtain resources if they necessarily couldn't afford it or it wasn't really in their budget?
Yes, so thank you so much for that question, Dr. Edmonds. So there are a number of ways you can be seen. If you don't have insurance, there are private pay, and with private pay, often there's what we call a sliding scale. So what we would do is if someone were to reach out to me or one of my colleagues and they were in need of some mental health support, then we would, find out they have insurance. If they don't have insurance, then we would say, okay, what we need to know is just a general idea about your finances so that we can offer you a sliding scale. So we really want to help people, and we don't want the inability to pay to be a deterrent. There's also community mental health centers where you can have free or low fee mental health services. And in these situations, you may end up seeing the licensed clinician, or you may see a graduate student or someone who is just about to obtain their license, but they're supervised by a licensed professional, and you're getting great quality care. We're just trying to make sure that people have access, and it's not prohibitive. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Definitely. And this is a nice segue into our next question. When searching for a new primary provider, what rating strategy or indicators should we look for to find a good provider?
Yeah, so there's access to reviews online. There's Google, there's Yelp as the two primary sources. There's probably many others. But as far as, I'll just put myself in the shoes of a patient, like I want to be able to get my questions answered, have a doctor who will listen, even though doctors are under a lot of time pressure, at least to have a moment to get some questions answered, and a level of accessibility. So if I need a doctor in between my appointment, under urgent circumstances, how can I get access to consultation and or care under an urgent setting? So those are the key: listening, answering questions, and accessibility. Those are the three top ones.
And for mental behavioral health, I would say the same thing. You can find online reviews. The resource that I put up in the PowerPoint was Psychology Today, and Psychology Today vets everyone who's listed there, and you can also oftentimes have a free consultation to see if it's a good fit, if the person is actually specializing in the area that you need assistance with. That's something to be mindful of as well.
All righty. Our next question is there a way to force an adult to go get mental health?
So
I don't think that's the right word, force, but that's what they use.
But I'm smiling a bit nervously because generally speaking, no, right? And unless they are a danger to themselves or others, then they can be put on a psychiatric hold. So if they're homicidal, suicidal, or something of that nature. But, I think we've seen instances of some celebrities who we all are like, they just need to be hospitalized. But you cannot force someone to be seen.
Yes. All you can do is just encourage, but you can't force.
Exactly.
But you would certainly hope, just as a little aside, because it's rare in my industry, but you would hope that by allowing them to hear themselves talk about it. So if they're coming to you and they're seeking care, there's an awareness that there's something that needs to change. And often by letting them hear themselves tell the story and mirroring it back to them, you can often get them to move in the direction, right? If they're completely 51-50, which is a danger to themselves or others, then that's a different story. And you have the need, you're almost bound to help protect them from themselves and others, in which case you could call a family member or, at last resort, involve law enforcement or a paramedic or emergency services to get them seen in the emergency room. But then that raises a whole nother social issue where, even in my case, in the rare cases when I have urgent, emergent psychiatric situations, we send them to the emergency room in the attempt to have psychiatry see them or for them to get a mental health assessment, and then therefore referrals. And it's just disappointment after disappointment from a healthcare professional standpoint, where either they wait a really long time for a psychiatrist to see them, and or reaching out as an outpatient, meaning not in the hospital, unable to find reliable care. And so that's a real deficit, even in the Beverly Hills area. And I'll say that because there's been many times. And so if anyone out there knows of quick ways for emergency psychiatric care, I'm open to add that and share that. So.
Definitely.
Yeah, mental health is, our whole topic about health, right? Whether it's physical health, mental health, there are a lot of stigma around healthcare, and some of that is rooted in how African Americans have been poorly treated, how they, we could go on and on about the things that have been done wrong to us. And so people are leery, they're like, what are you trying to do with me? Why are you trying to give me that? So they have a lot of questions. And as my colleague, Dr. Edmond says, when you're looking for a good fit for whether it's a medical doctor or a clinician, you want to be heard, right? Many times I'm sitting in the office with families and they're like almost shocked that I'm listening to them, right? I mean, I've had grown men crying because they're like, you're listening to my wife, you're listening to my partner. I knew something was wrong with my kid. Nobody, everybody's like, oh, he'll just grow out of it. And as I'm sitting there, taking notes, listening and engaging, they're stunned. So if more, professionals took an extra 5 minutes, it would help reduce some of the stigma. We're not going to be able to solve everything, but I think we do sort of, fight an uphill battle around having people feel comfortable going to the doctor.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Now I'm seeing a few people speaking about relaxation and, trouble with sleeping. And, they say sleep is the cousin of death, with that hustler mentality, spirit. And, a few people are asking, how can they break out of that hustling, grinding mentality and because they feel like they're wasting time if they're not being productive.
So I'm going to jump in with that. And I know my colleague, Dr. Edmonds, is going to follow up with the physical aspect, but that myth needs to be dispelled. It needs to be busted. There's so much science around sleep and rest. One of the things that we had to study about in our licensure, which is 175 years ago for me, but I remember saying, part of it was like rest is restorative. Like that was one of the things that I had in my head about it. And I think it's important to understand sleep hygiene. Like you need rest. Now, there is no magic number. Everybody is different, right? So some people require more, some people require less, but you have to have a darkened room. You shouldn't have a TV in a room. You shouldn't bring your cell phone in the room. There's so many things that keep your brain wired that even if you're in the bed, you're not reaching those deep sleep levels which you need for health, right? So this is one of the areas that I'm very passionate about. And when I was doing some research, not quite 175 years ago, maybe 100 years ago, I learned that having a TV in your room was not healthy. So I have not had, there's no TVs in any of the bedrooms in my house, because that screen, that blue screen, even when it's off, it's still emitting, things that interrupt your brain waves. So I think, again, it's important to pare down and rest and get healthy sleep and get healthy sleep hygiene. And sorry, Dr. Edmonds, don't mean to, but it is important.
That was excellent. That was excellent. And I even learned something. So for all of you listening, the TV still releases radiation when it's off or emits energy. Like, I'm in shock. So that's really insightful. And I completely agree. Rest is restorative. And in terms of sleep hygiene, I tell my patients the bedroom, 2 purposes.
That's right.
Sex and sleeping. That's it. No TV, no phone. We all violate the rule, but sex and sleeping, that's it, nothing else. So if we can do that, we will improve our sleep. And I completely agree. But in terms of how to shut off that mind, because I'm the kind of person that works at all hours of the day and night. And so I have to create tricks for myself, someone who can be called at any moment and have to go from sleep to doing surgery within 30 minutes. It requires a special trick, right? And so when it's time to shut down, I have to use music or aromatherapy, and all these things are free, right? I mean, maybe not free, but it's low cost. You can get your aromatherapy $5 at the drugstore. A little lavender, a little peppermint will bring you right down. Then you can use water, right? Take a hot shower, kind of rub the lotion in, like massage your body, massage your feet. All the nerves end in your feet. So if you want to really unwire yourself, rub your feet 2-3 minutes in the evening to unwind. Excellent way to unwind. Some say melatonin plus or minus, you can have your own experience with that. But then when it's time to go down, here comes the breath again. We talked about it, both of us, Lorena and I. So breathing, you don't even need a timer, but if you just focus in, 4 beats in, hold for 4 beats out, you will rewire your body within 60 seconds. And then all of a sudden you're gone and you don't even know what happened. So really work on those things that are readily available. Music, breathing, massage, hot shower, aromatherapy. The list is long. Pick one and have an experience.
And in terms of the bedroom, for those of you who do have TVs in your bedroom and you're not going to check them, a trick is to just put a sheet or a blanket or something over it before you go to bed, and that will resolve the issue as well.
Definitely. Oh, this is a really great question. Since the pandemic, some students have become isolated with remote learning and school closures. Do you know of any national groups that minority women, young college-age students can get together to build social and mental wellness? Such groups' opportunities do not exist at their college, which is disappointing.
So offhand, I can't name any national groups, but if someone wants to email me, directly, I can definitely find something. And some schools have affinity groups now, not all of them, but it might be, okay to look into starting one at the university that the person who has the question is from, because they may be able to get some funding for that.
Good point. Schools always are measured by their student success, right? So they have a vested interest in making sure that their students are healthy. And if your school is not offering that, I hear Mahatma Gandhi's words, be the change, right? You don't have to be bold or necessarily courageous. You need to go, if you're on campus and you live in campus housing, go to your resident director, your resident assistant, and tell them, create a survey. I need help, and I need somebody to create a survey to distribute to all the students in my dorm, just on a small scale, maybe 100 people, and see what percentage of people in your building have the same problem and to what degree. And then it can obviously grow from there, and then they'll create a program to support you, but you do not have to suffer. I reference YouTube very often because you can literally type in anything, support for isolation from COVID, and you will find something to get you on the pathway to feeling connected to the rest of the world. So,
And I would follow up with that because I was an administrator at a couple of universities. Check with your student support offices or your Office of Student Affairs. Sometimes they call them different things. There should be a liaison in the office that you can go to and let them know, hey, here's a challenge that I'm having. How can you help me? Because as Dr. Edmond said, the university has a vested interest in you, more than oftentimes you think. And so as a student or as a parent, your voice carries a lot of weight. And, sometimes in a positive way and sometimes not so much. But in this instance, I think that this would be something valid and valuable. So you can go to your Office of Student Affairs. There should be a dean of student affairs or whoever's in there, and let them know. And that's where, when I said there, you may be able to get some funding behind, the money flows through that office for student activities. So like if you have your BSU or, these other types of groups, or even if there's an affinity group, you can get money for like pizza and whatever, right? So, so definitely utilize that resource at your university.
Great advice, ladies. So earlier we were speaking about indicators and strategies to find, a good provider, but specifically, how do you find someone who is culturally competent?
Yeah, so there's no test for that. Sorry.
Even if they have the same cultural background as you.
That's right. And so they, people will say, even in their, tagline, culturally competent, blah, 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 that just means that they may or may not have had a course in cultural diversity or taken a continuing education. So the thing that I usually say is look for goodness of fit, right? So cultural competency can mean a number of things. And just because you walk into the room and see a person who looks like you doesn't mean they have the same identity as you do. So be mindful, try to get a recommendation. If there's someone who went to see somebody, ask them how it was, if it was good or bad, or somewhere in the middle, because that's important as well. And take consultations. And sometimes you really just have to start with someone to know, right? And if it's not working out, then you can change. You can change your physician, you can change your therapist. You don't have to feel like you're stuck with them.
Definitely. Our next question is, when a psychiatrist doesn't take notes, is it best to find another therapist?
So not necessarily, because a psychiatrist is an MD who is prescribing you medications. They may do some therapy with you, but they're really, they're going to be the one giving you the medication. So there should be some note taking at some point, but it may be after you leave the room. So I don't do therapy anymore, but because I've done it for almost 30 years, I don't take notes during the sessions, right? It's all in here. And the way that I was trained early on in my graduate studies, because I had a terminal master's before I started my PhD program, in my master's program, they really trained our ear and how to retain points of, that could trigger, right? So the note taking is then after the session so that you're fully engaged with the person during the session. If you're doing this the whole time, then you're not doing this, right? So that's not a bad thing. And, I say a litmus test would be like, when you go back the next time, do they remember what you were talking about? Do they have you confused with someone else, or do they pick right back up where you left off at? Those are the things that I would recommend.
Beautiful.
Definitely. Next question. I just started seeing a therapist. She doesn't take insurance. I end up paying $100 per session. Why is that?
So I don't know exactly, but in your intake or your first session during your consultation, there should have been a discussion about insurance and fees. So if that number was a surprise to you, then that I think that maybe should have been handled a little differently. But if you are sort of an out-of-pocket cash pay, that is actually on the low end. So they are cutting you a break. And if that's still too much for you, see if there's any room for negotiation on the price.
Okay. Now, for those that are asking about the replay of this session, yes, it will be available. The Urban League will be emailing everyone once it's available, and they've posted it on their YouTube page. And I see a question here. Dr. Hill, are you accepting new patients?
So no, I'm not. I actually specialize in neurodevelopmental testing and assessment. So I don't do therapy anymore. But if you reach out to me, I can refer you to one of my colleagues in our group that does therapy and is accepting new clients.
Awesome. All righty. Let's see. Well, are there any signs that for people to look out for in terms of mental health issues within their families?
So I would say it depends, right? There can be something that is, as I don't want to minimize it, but someone can be stressed out, right? Stress, anxiety, that those things we're looking for, sleep disruption, mood, like just grumpy, cutting everybody off, doesn't want to be bothered. And so those are some things that maybe you could go in and just talk, have a few sessions and things could improve. We also, in my practice, we also think about things like Dr. Edmond said, which was melatonin to help with sleep, but you want to be mindful of that because you really don't want to be on it longer than just, about a week at a time. And that's on the long end. There's also SAMe, which can be purchased over the counter, and that can help, improve mood. But then if you're thinking about something a little more acute, like, some type of mood disorder, or if there's some type of biological issue, brain issue, then that would be schizophrenia or bipolar. I would say look for anything that is not normal, right? And normal can change. We are still dealing with a pandemic, right? So how we all were before then is one way to think about normal. But now that we've been dealing with this sort of, uncertainty, everybody's anxious, right? Everybody's feeling a little wet, some kind of way. And then, regardless of what your political or socio-political or global political views are, there has been a lot of disruption, right? And so, you and your feelings about how suddenly this group is getting a lot of funding and we ain't never got nothing, or, when that person was running for office, what that might have looked like. So there was a lot of like collective stress, right? So when that happens, if you're looking around and you look to the left and right and everybody is feeling anxious and stressed, then that means you're normal, right? But if you're looking to the left and looking to the right and you're the only one where your hair is falling out or you gained 15 pounds and everybody else is losing weight, there's probably something going on. So you want to talk to your, family physician, your general practitioner, or you want to talk to your therapist just to get a handle on things. Just say like, am I crazy right now? Or, is it just me? Or so that sort of, gut check and checking with your friends, family, and loved ones. Like, it's okay. One of the things that I think is great is like, there's a lot of PSAs now with diverse people checking in, saying, are you doing okay? It's on social media, it's on television, and it's okay to ask somebody if they're okay, right? Mm-hmm. And it's also okay for you to say, am I okay? Is it me? And hopefully your support system will be able to say, yeah, no, that was crazy and you're not, or that was a little off and I think we need to unpack that a bit.
Yes.
Yeah, I like that very much. You talk about, oh my gosh, the ring light is not working. You talk about using the word crazy. I like to demystify that, right? Because we use it, we throw it around so much, and then let's normalize it. Let's just call it what it is and stop. Yeah. Well, it's almost pathologizing, right? It's like, oh, I'm just crazy. Like, no, let's see. Are you anxious? Is there a reason for it? Can we do something about it? Sometimes during the pandemic, we couldn't do a whole lot about it, but again, I just really appreciate the question from the person who felt like she was isolated and didn't have a lifeline. And we all have a lifeline somewhere to be able to get out of that space that within ourselves we may call crazy. There is a pathway through it. Definitely. And to not get stuck in it, I think, is the key, because we all can bob in and out of challenging spaces. But we go back to the breathing and the ways of caring for ourselves on a daily basis to keep us on that surfboard. There was an analogy given, like, stay on your surfboard because the next wave is coming, right? So if we look at life knowing that there's something's gonna happen around the corner, it doesn't have to be anything life-changing, but it's gonna be something for us to handle and address. And if we have a method of handling those things on a daily basis, we don't have to get thrown off the surfboard and have to swim back to it and spend so much extra energy, time, money to get back on base. So
yes, no person is an island.
No person is an island. We're all, I like to use the example, we're all swimming we're all on the same boat with one oar. And if we work together, we can go forward. So definitely get on the other side of that boat so we can get forward.
Our next question is for you, Dr. Edmond. What do you think about the bioidentical hormones?
Yeah. So this has been sort of an ongoing debate for the last 20 years. 20 years ago, there was an article that went out, it's called the Nurses Study, that said, hormones are bad. And so it put all the research on hormones, the improvement that it used to help improve hot flashes and all the changes that women go through, it turned it on its heels. We had to roll it all back. People were stopping hormones. But then later on, maybe 4 or 5 years after that, they said, okay, it's not that they're bad, just in certain people, smokers or people who have other health conditions, that it may not be okay. It can increase your risk for heart attack, stroke. Be careful. So this person, I saw in the message that she was 66 years old. So when it comes to starting hormones, the ideal time, and I screen for this in my patients, is as that transition is happening. So the average age for menopause is 51 and a half. And we start getting symptoms in many cases 5, 10 years before. And so if we find out that, it can show up in many ways: poor concentration, can't remember, poor focus, can't sleep, snapping, getting angry. And so some of those we think, okay, that's crazy, right? But no, maybe you do need to see someone like Dr. Hill, or we need to check your hormones, what's happening there. And so there's many ways to correct that through diet, exercise, lifestyle change, being aware, giving yourself the space you need if you're, if it's too much intensity, to pull away and take a break, take a breather. All these things sound so like blasé, passé, but they do really, if implemented consistently, can provide a significant benefit. So in a direct answer to your question, bioidentical hormones use the same ingredients as the prescription pills. So it's just a matter of the bioidenticals being able to be adjusted and customized for what you need. And so that's what makes it more attractive. It's not that they're more natural, which is the word they used to use. They're natural on the natural hormones. Like, okay. It's just able to be used as a topical. You can put it on your skin. It can be injected as a pellet in your hip. It can be put as a drop underneath your tongue. It can be put on as a patch. And then there's the traditional pill form. But in terms of starting it over the age of 65, I do not recommend. Why? Because the transition of menopause is generally complete by 60. And so if you're having challenges related to other symptoms, we have to get a little more specific. Hot flashes, for example. We know that hot flashes can be triggered by alcohol and caffeine. I don't know if any women out there have had a personal experience where when they drink a glass of wine, they start sweating. And so that tells you that activates hot flashes, and caffeine is also another culprit. So I'd say stop those things, get into a daily exercise routine to help balance your body. And let's look at what you're putting in your mouth, because I can identify some of the foods that are contributing to your hot flashes and correct some of that. So that's it.
Righty. Thank you. For our next question, how fast should I run from my psychiatrist who gives no feedback?
I saw that. Real fast. Yes, run, do not walk. No, but one of the things that you can try to do before you run from them is have a conversation with them and say, I've been coming here for, I don't know, and however long I've been coming here, and I feel like, and it seems like, I'm just in telling you one thing and you're not saying anything. It's not a dialogue, right? We're not having a conversation. It's a monologue, me to you. And so I, would like to know if there's any way that we can have a discussion. And so if they are open to it, because as Dr. Edmond said, there's time limits, right? There's only so much time we have for allotted, right? And so if you feel like, at least we could talk for 5 minutes, or you can give me some feedback, or when I say this, let me know, or, the medication isn't working, and here's what I'm thinking. Those are the things to be mindful of. But if they're, tight-lipped, then you might want to move on, because maybe there's some implicit bias there. Maybe the person just doesn't know how to engage. And, you are a partner with your doctor. There shouldn't be this hierarchy where this is the doctor and I'm the client or the patient. No, it should be like this, right? So I would encourage you to have a dialogue with them, or try to. And if you can't, then, then you can move on. You don't have to feel stuck.
Definitely, definitely. Well, this concludes our Q&A portion of the program. Thank you, ladies, for a wonderful job. Let's give virtual hands, everyone, even though we can't see each other. Yes, yes, yes. Thank you, ladies, for sharing your insight and your knowledge and reminding us that health is indeed wealth. We will now turn over to Mr. Reverend Gerald. Oh, and one last thing, several people have asked, how can they get in contact with you all?
I have a website, and it's www. We can type it up in the response to the chat. I'll type it here, .edmondobgyn.com. So you can go there. There's an option to leave a message, or you can call and leave a message as well.
Great. All righty. Over to you, Reverend Gerald. Oh, unmute yourself. There you go.
Oh, I did. Thank you, Dr. Edmond and Dr. Hill, for that great presentation. That was a lot of good information. And I hope those of you listening will share that information that you got tonight with your family and your friends. And we look forward to seeing you at our next BWARP session, which is handling business, or women, I should say, handling business. And that's going to feature financial planner Melanie Perry and business coach Star Cobb. And that will be Wednesday, May 11th. So make sure that you're on for that, and make sure you let everybody else know about the great BWARP presentations that we have here for you, that's presented by the Los Angeles Urban League and Parkside EDC. Thank you, Jacinda, for all that you do to make this thing happen. And now I'm going to turn it over to the guy that makes everything happen in LA, Michael Lawson, President and CEO of the Los Angeles Urban League.
Thank you very much, Reverend Gerald, for those kind words. And good evening, everyone. My name is Michael Lawson, and I am President and CEO of the Los Angeles Urban League. And on behalf of the Los Angeles Urban League and Parkside Economic Development Corporation, I thank you for participating in tonight's Wealth Attainment and Retention program. We hope that tonight's presentations were of much benefit to each of you. I know they were beneficial to me. I want to thank Dr. Regina Edmonds and Dr. Lauren Hill for generously sharing with us their wealth of knowledge of healthcare. I also thank Gerald Smith, Reverend Gerald Smith, Chairman of Parkside Economic Development Corporation, and Brian Williams, the Chief Operating Officer of the Los Angeles Urban League, for their leadership in presenting BWARP, as we fondly call this webinar series. Thank you again, Jacinda, for your continued support producing BWARP. We also hope that the information which was shared with you will contribute to your success in building generational wealth for your families. We have a mission of building $2 billion of net worth for our community in Los Angeles County over the next 10 years. We are going to rebuild what the Greenwood district of Tulsa in Los Angeles. We hope that you will join us in this noble quest. Please continue to check our website, laul.org, for information on the work that we are conducting. Again, thank you for attending tonight's BWARP webinar. Good night.
Good night, everybody.